The Scott Hennard Show. Without any further ado, former member of Congress from Minnesota, former top advisor and supporter of Governor Tim Pawlenty's presidential run, our friend Vin Weber, back with us on the Common Sense Club and the Scott Hennard Show. Vin, how you doing?
Hey, I'm great. How are you doing?
Fantastic. I understand you're driving the highways and byways of the great state of Minnesota as we speak. So,
I've been all over. I drove from Walker, Minnesota, where we've got a summer house on Leaks Lake, all the way down to my hometown of Slayton, the other end of the state, for a funeral of a Lutheran minister who was the father of my best friend growing up. And now I'm driving back to the Twin Cities. So I'm seeing a lot of Minnesota in a short period of time.
Exactly right. Were you surprised at Tim Pawlenty's decision over the weekend to bow out of the presidential race?
Yes, I was. Having said that, we all understood that if he didn't finish well and be perceived as finishing well, it was going to make raising money very difficult. But I thought that he would wait for a while, test the waters a little bit, see how negatively the environment had been impacted by his finish, and then make a decision. What surprised me was the immediacy of his decision to pull out.
And when you talk about the fundraising, I mean, first of all, third place finish. I mean, he talked all along. He didn't raise expectations too high. He said, I want to get in the top tier. He got in the top tier. Obviously, it was a close race between 1 and 2, Bachman and Ron Paul. He was a little further down in third. I took that as a decent sign for him that he was in the top 3, given that he had a heck of a battle sort of getting his name ID up there and getting into the top hunt. But was the third place, when you talk about fundraising, was that third place finish just not enough to give him enough fuel to continue to get supporters writing checks?
That's what it came down to. I really believed and still believe that if he had been able to stay in, he would have strengthened himself as the process went along in Iowa. I mean, you have to remember, the straw poll matters and it's important, and I don't want to diss the folks of Iowa at all, but it is just a straw poll. People aren't making a decision that really matters there in the sense of choosing delegates. By the time you get down to those caucuses in January, people are actually making a decision about who they really think should be our nominee for president. And I think some of Tim's arguments about electability and ability to unify the party would have resonated a little more as you got closer to those caucuses. I still think he could have been competitive there. But if you don't have the money to run the campaign, all these arguments are just so much hot air, and apparently they just were not getting the signal from their finance team that they could go on.
I was wondering how much a role Rick Perry's entrance played in his early departure, knowing that the Perry team is a bit of a fundraising juggernaut. I mean, did that play a part?
Well, I think it in a couple of ways. The Perry team is going to raise money immediately because he's the governor of the biggest red state in the country. That's a great base to have behind you. A lot of money in Houston and Dallas and throughout Texas, so that's good. But in addition to that, it said to all of the undecided donors around the country, the people that Tim Pawlenty had been courting and was hoping would come over to his side after the straw poll, it says they have another big contender to think about, another big candidate for their financial support. And so it just made it look tougher and tougher for him to start signing up some of the people that would have allowed him to really break through on the fundraising side and carry on through January.
How much was Michelle Bachmann's entry into this race, the writing on the wall that, unfortunately was going to make it difficult for Tim Pawlenty to get to the finish line of either winning in Iowa or ultimately having enough there to fight on South Carolina, New Hampshire, and on to the nomination battle? Was Bachmann's entry what ultimately led to this, do you believe?
It was huge. I've known Michelle Bachmann since she first got into politics running for the Minnesota State Senate. And I told everybody in the campaign and out of the campaign, she is going to be very formidable if she gets in. There are very few people that I've seen in Republican politics that can connect with a conservative audience the way Michelle Bachmann can, and she really proved that. And unfortunately for Tim Pawlenty, it went right into his base down there, or at least the base that he had hoped to cultivate in Iowa, and it made it just about impossible. And I would say going forward, all the other candidates, including Rick Perry, don't underestimate Michelle Bachmann.
By the way, you should know that I know you got in a little hot water over that sex appeal comment, but we had Michelle on the day that that story broke, and she said, "Heck, I consider that good news. That wasn't derogatory. That was a compliment." Just so you know.
Well, I appreciate you telling me that. I apologize for a bad choice of words, but I want people to understand why I apologize. Michelle has been a friend of mine, and I've got a lot of respect for her, and I really never meant anything other than a complimentary statement. But if people were interpreting that as my saying, well, she doesn't have any substance, then that's wrong, and that's why I issued an apology. But there was never a problem between Michelle and I. We've been friends since she got into politics, I think very highly of her.
When you say substance there, do you think that the governor went a little far in the debate on Thursday night and so forcefully attacking her lack of accomplishments?
I think he had a tough assignment in how to figure out how to handle Michelle Bachmann. And I think, yes, probably he attacked a little harder than he should have. But I'm not sure what the right way of doing it would have been. As you saw from Michelle in both the debates, as well as in some of the things like her interview with Chris Wallace on Fox News a few weeks ago, she handles these things very, very deftly. And you attack her kind of at your own risk, because she doesn't get rattled, she doesn't come off as mean-spirited, she doesn't get defensive, she handles it well, and the attacker ends up looking bad. And I'm afraid that's what happened a little bit to Tim Pawlenty.
The governor said over the weekend that it was clear voters were not responding to his message, viable as that was, and we're looking for someone who is a little more firebrand than what he brings to the table. I mean, I love Tim Pawlenty. He's just a rock-solid guy in a lot of ways. But what he's not is someone that's going to have you just jumping up and down crazy after a political rally. I mean, he's solid. He's got a great record, but he just sort of doesn't have that, take the masses and get them to walk on burning coals for you. So he seems to be reading the tea leaves of the electorate out there, saying they need somebody with a little more firebrand, fire and brimstone, pound the podium than me. Do you think he's right?
Yeah, I'm afraid that he is right, and I want to just underscore the first thing you said. He is a terrific guy. He's a terrific governor. He's a great conservative. He's a good friend of mine. I think he'd have been a perfect candidate to contrast with Barack Obama and a fine president of the United States. But I think that our conservative troops out there wanted somebody that was going to get them out of their chairs applauding a little bit more. And that's not necessarily his style. He's a guy of great substance and great character, but his style is not to try to push every emotional button for an audience. And I'm afraid that probably hurt him.
Who does his departure most help?
I think it will help a number of candidates, but I think that it will probably help Romney somewhat. Romney is the front runner. He's got similar experience background, being a former governor. He matches up pretty well in the polls against Obama, and I would think a lot of the people that were pragmatically looking at Tim Pawlenty will say, well, Mitt Romney probably is our best alternative, although I don't think that's going to be by any means unanimous. He's got people that will be coming after his supporters from every camp.
And correct me if I'm wrong, last cycle you were a Mitt Romney supporter. I mean, do you go back to Mitt Romney at this point? What are you going to do?
Well, I was a Romney supporter last time. I have nothing but admiration for Governor Romney. I'm going to let the dust settle a little bit. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I'm sort of at a stage in my life where all the people running are at one level or another of mine. Newt Gingrich is a friend. Michelle Bachmann's a friend. I know Rick Perry. I'm not quite as close to him personally. Rick Santorum is a friend. That's very nice in one way, but it also makes it a little painful to make the decision in another way. But I want to get involved. I want to help us defeat Barack Obama and elect a Republican president. So I'm going to decide the next few days who I can pitch in and help, and if they can find some use for me, I'll be involved.
Do you anticipate the staff mostly going in one direction? I mean, that's got to be a bit of a shocker for them. And he had one heck of a staff built and infrastructure around him, partly with your help and others as well. I mean, do you see them, majority of that infrastructure going to one candidate or another, or scattering?
My guess is, and it's only a guess, my guess is that they sort of scatter. I don't think that they were anticipating this happening so quickly. I don't think that there's one campaign ready to go. You know, you can make an argument that Rick Perry, just getting into the race, might want to scoop a whole bunch of them up, but he already has kind of a staff and infrastructure. He got a lot of the people that left the Gingrich campaign. So I think it's going to be, I would doubt that they will all go in one direction. I think they'll end up splitting up in a number of ways.
Last question for you, Vin. Vin Weber, our guest on the Common Sense Club, reacting to Governor Tim Pawlenty exiting the presidential race this weekend. What's next for Tim Pawlenty, and do you believe that he might potentially consider seriously a run for Senate against Amy Klobuchar, as being rumored?
I would doubt that very, very much. I think that, he's been working this very hard, literally for years, and he's not a man of wealth. I think that he will try to spend a little time paying attention to his family's financial condition, but by no means do I think that he's out of politics. I don't think he'll run against Amy Klobuchar. I do think he will get back into politics. And there's a lot of options. You know, in 2 years, he could run for either governor or senator against Al Franken or Mark Dayton, or he could wait and run for president again if we don't have a Republican president at that point. And I know Tim Pawlenty pretty well. I don't think that the desire to public service is gone at all there. But I would be very surprised if he would just turn right around and start running against Senator Klobuchar.
He's put out a note to campaign supporters today, just actually ended up in my inbox a moment ago, and among other things, talking about the decision this weekend, saying we'll be taking time to prayerfully consider what is next. One thing is for sure, I remain committed to turning this country around, getting a Republican elected to the White House, and advancing the values we share in common and hold so dear. So that holds with what you're saying. Who would you expect that Governor Pawlenty would throw his support behind?
I wouldn't even venture a guess. I mean, I know he thinks highly of many of the candidates, and I know his wife, who was one of the great assets of the campaign, Mary Pawlenty, is also very involved in these discussions. But I wouldn't even guess who they're going to throw their support behind. But I think he will throw it behind somebody. I mean, he cares about the country. He's a fierce competitor. He's not one to stay on the sideline.
Fascinating. Vin, appreciate the update. Drive safely, and thanks for the time chatting today.
Always great to talk with you.
All right, take care. Vin Weber, a top campaign supporter of Tim Pawlenty, part of that core team in his presidential run. And, of course, a former member of Congress now, a bit of a power broker out of Washington, D.C., with lots of different folks, and but a Minnesotan nonetheless. Once a Minnesotan, always a Minnesotan. Take a break, come back with more on the Common Sense Club. We're going to check in with Robert